Listen to me carefully. While everyone out there is desperate for attention, begging for validation, and drowning in their social media feeds hoping someone will notice them, you're here searching for something they'll never understand. Solitude isn't your enemy. It's not a sign that you failed or that something's broken inside you. Solitude is your secret laboratory. It's where kings are forged while pawns play their little games. Machiavelli knew this. Every great strategist in history knew this. And if you stay with me for the next few minutes, you're going to understand why solitude is the most lethal weapon nobody ever taught you how to use. Because while they're out there chasing likes and comments, you're going to build an internal empire that nobody can touch. The first time I truly understood this, I was at the lowest point of my life. I had lost everything I thought mattered. Friends who turned out to be ghosts when things got difficult. A relationship that had drained every last drop of energy from my soul. A job that made me feel like I was just a number, completely replaceable and worthless. I was left alone, completely alone. And you know what the most brutal part of all that was? It wasn't the solitude itself. It was realizing that I had spent years running from it, filling every single second with noise because I was terrified of facing myself. But there, in that silence that scared me to death, I found something that changed everything. I found clarity. I found the only person who would never abandon me. Myself. And it was in that moment when I started to understand what Machiavelli really meant when he talked about power. True power doesn't come from how many people surround you. It comes from how strong you are when you're completely alone. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. When was the last time you spent an entire day without distractions? Without your phone buzzing every 5 minutes, without background music, without Netflix, without anything to rescue you from your own thoughts? If the answer is never or I can't remember, then brother, you're in trouble. Because you're living someone else's life, reacting to external stimuli like Pavlov's dog and calling it freedom. Modern society has programmed you to be terrified of solitude. They sold you the lie that you need to be constantly connected, constantly busy, constantly entertained. Why? Because a person who masters their solitude is dangerous to the system. They're someone who doesn't need external validation, who doesn't buy things to fill emotional voids, who doesn't accept mediocre jobs just to feel like they're part of something. They're someone truly free, and real freedom scares those who want to control you. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in complete isolation. He was exiled, stripped of power, left alone with nothing but his thoughts and his pen. And in that forced solitude, he created one of the most influential works on power that humanity has ever known. It wasn't a coincidence. It was solitude that allowed him to see with clarity what others, distracted by the daily political theater, could never see. Solitude is where wisdom is distilled. Now I understand that many of you have arrived here because solitude wasn't a choice. You were betrayed, abandoned, turned your back on when you needed them most. And it hurts. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it doesn't hurt, but listen to me carefully. That pain you're feeling right now is your greatest gift if you know how to use it. It's the universe expelling from your life the people who were holding you back, clearing the path so you can become who you're truly destined to be. Every great leader, every brilliant strategist, every person who changed the game had their season in the desert. That's where they shed borrowed ideas, other people's opinions, the expectations that others had placed on them. Solitude is the fire that burns away everything you're not, leaving only what's essential, what's true, what's powerful. Think about it this way. When you're constantly surrounded by people, your decisions are contaminated. You act based on what you think others expect from you. You talk a certain way, dress a certain way, pursue certain goals, not because you really want them, but because they fit with the image you want to project. You're an actor in a play you didn't write. But in solitude, the masks fall. There's no audience, Just you and the raw truth of who you are and what you really want. And here's the secret power. When you know your truth, when you've faced it in solitude without filters or distractions, you become unshakable. People can manipulate someone who seeks approval. They can control someone who needs to belong. But they can't touch someone who has found themselves in silence. That person has become a fortress. Most people use relationships and social connections as emotional crutches. They need constant validation because they never developed a solid relationship with themselves. They're like buildings without foundations. They look good from the outside, but any earthquake will bring them down. Solitude is where you build those foundations. It's where you ask yourself the difficult questions and force yourself to answer with brutal honesty. Who am I when nobody's watching? What do I really want? Not what they told me I should want. What are my values, not the ones I inherited or adopted to fit in? What am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to defend? These questions aren't answered at the party, at the office, or on social media. They're answered in solitude. Machiavelli understood that the prince, the true leader, must be capable of making unpopular decisions. He must be able to withstand hatred, criticism, temporary isolation for doing what's right for his long-term vision. And that's only possible if you're not enslaved by the need for approval. Solitude trains you for this. It teaches you that you can survive without the constant applause of the masses. There's another aspect that almost nobody mentions. Solitude is where you sharpen your observation skills. When you're not constantly talking, you start to truly listen. When you're not constantly reacting, you start to analyze patterns. You see how people work, what motivates them, what their hidden fears and desires are. You become a student of human behavior. And that, my friend, that is pure strategic power. I've noticed something fascinating in my own life and in the lives of others who have mastered solitude. They develop a different presence. When they walk into a room, there's something about them that's magnetic yet intimidating at the same time. They're not seeking attention, but they naturally capture it. They're not trying to prove anything. And paradoxically, that makes them more credible. It's because they've done the internal work that others avoid. They've fought their demons in private and emerged victorious. Solitude is also your mental gymnasium. It's where you strengthen your discipline, your focus, your capacity to withstand discomfort without running toward the first distraction. Think of it as endurance training for your mind. Every hour you spend comfortable in your own company, without needing external stimuli, is a repetition that makes you stronger. And in a world full of people with the attention span of a goldfish, someone who can maintain deep focus is a superhero. Now, I'm not romanticizing complete permanent isolation. That would be stupid. Humans are social beings, and genuine connections have value. But here's the crucial difference. You must be able to be alone without feeling lonely. You must be able to choose connection from a place of strength, not desperate need. When you master your solitude, your relationships improve dramatically. Because you're no longer using other people to fill voids. You're complete on your own, and you share that completeness with others. You don't beg for it. Let me give you a concrete example of how to use this strategically. Let's say you're in an important negotiation, whether it's for a job, a business deal, or anything where there's something at stake. The person who's comfortable with silence, who can sit in that tension without feeling the need to fill every pause with words, has a massive advantage. Why? Because most people hate uncomfortable silence and will talk to break it, frequently revealing more than they should. But if you've trained in solitude, silence is your territory. It's where you're most powerful. Or consider this scenario. Someone tries to manipulate you using social pressure or FOMO. The fear of missing out. Everyone's going to be there. What will they think if you don't come? You don't want to be left out of the group. These tactics work spectacularly well on people who haven't developed strength in solitude. But if you've already spent time with yourself and know that being alone isn't a death sentence, These manipulations have no power over you. You can say no without anxiety. Solitude is also where you plan without interference. Great military strategists, business geniuses, chess masters, they all need time alone to visualize future moves, anticipate responses, calculate probabilities. It's impossible to do this with the constant noise of external opinions. Your solitude is your war room. It's where you map out your conquest, whatever it is you're conquering, a professional goal, a personal project, or simply the best version of yourself. And here's something I learned the hard way. People can feel when you're solid internally. There's a different energy. I can't explain it scientifically, but I've experienced it, and I've seen it. When you've done the work in solitude, when you've faced yourself and built a strong internal foundation, you project a quiet confidence that's irresistible. It's not loud arrogance, it's silent certainty. And that attracts opportunities, respect, and quality people into your life. But watch out, there's a trap here, and I want you to be aware of it. Solitude can become a prison if you use it to escape instead of to grow. If you're hiding from the world because you're afraid, that's not power, that's cowardice. The difference is in the intention. Are you using solitude to build something, to strengthen yourself, to gain clarity? Or are you using it to avoid risks and responsibilities? Be honest with yourself about this. Machiavelli never talked about hiding. He talked about strategically retreating to come back stronger. I've seen many cases of people who transformed periods of forced isolation into their greatest advantages. A friend lost his job and spent 6 months without finding anything. Instead of getting completely depressed, though he had his dark moments, he used that time to learn a skill he had always postponed: programming. 6 months later, he not only got a job, but he got one that paid better because he had used his forced solitude as an opportunity. He had no social distractions because he had no money to go out. He turned a curse into a blessing. Or think about elite athletes. Everyone talks about their public successes, the medals, the trophies, the fame, but nobody sees the thousands of hours of solitary training. 5 in the morning when they're alone in the gym while everyone sleeps. The visualization sessions in silence. The strict diet that separates them socially. All that disciplined solitude is what creates the moment of glory that the world sees. Power is always built in private, demonstrated in public. Now let me share something personal that took me a long time to understand. For a long time, I thought that being sociable, having lots of friends, always being available was a sign of success. I felt guilty when I wanted to be alone. I thought there was something wrong with me, but eventually I understood that society confuses quantity with quality. I'd rather have 3 real friends with whom I can be completely myself than 300 superficial contacts with whom I have to act. And to know who those 3 real ones are, you need to spend time with yourself first. You need to know yourself well enough to recognize who truly complements you versus who just fills space. Solitude teaches you emotional self-sufficiency, and this is critical in the modern world where so many people are emotionally codependent without even knowing it. They need their partner to feel complete. They need their friends to validate every decision. They need likes on Instagram to feel like their day was worthwhile. That's not living. That's surviving on constant emotional life support. But when you master your solitude, you disconnect from that machine. You no longer need external validation to know you have value. You know it because you've proven it to yourself in silence. If you ask me what the most powerful exercise you can do is, though it sounds simple, it's this: spend time alone without any digital distraction. No phone, no computer, no television. Just you, maybe a notebook and a pen if you want. Sit with your thoughts. At first, it's going to be uncomfortable, even distressing. Your mind is going to scream for stimulation. But resist. Stay there, because in that discomfort is where transformation begins. It's where your mind finally starts to process everything you've been avoiding. It's where real ideas emerge, not the ones you consumed from others, but your own. Machiavelli also understood something crucial about power. It must be exercised from a place of abundance, not scarcity. When you act from need, people smell it and exploit it. But when you act from completeness, from the knowledge that you'll be fine with or without whatever you're seeking, your negotiating position is infinitely stronger. And that internal abundance is only cultivated in solitude. It's where you realize you already have everything you need inside you. There's a concept in psychology called internal versus external locus of control. People with an external locus believe their life is controlled by external forces, by other people, by luck. They're constantly reacting. People with an internal locus understand that although they can't control everything that happens, they can control how they respond. And guess where that internal locus develops? In solitude. When you spend enough time with yourself, you realize that the only person who truly controls your life is you. Not your parents, not your boss, not society. You. I also want to talk about creativity, because this is something most people overlook. All the great works of art, literature, inventions, scientific discoveries were born in solitude. Genuine creativity requires mental space that simply doesn't exist when you're constantly bombarded by external inputs. You need that time alone where your mind can wander, make unusual connections, explore ideas without the immediate judgment of others. Geniuses aren't geniuses because they were born different. They're geniuses because they fiercely protected their time in solitude. When you start seeing solitude as your secret weapon instead of your enemy, everything changes. You start seeking it intentionally. You start creating spaces in your life for it. Maybe it's a daily walk alone. Maybe it's waking up an hour earlier than everyone to have that sacred time with yourself. Maybe it's a weekend retreat where you turn everything off and simply exist. Each person will find their way, but the key is to be intentional about this. Don't let solitude be something you only experience when you feel bad or when you have no other options. Make it an active part of your life strategy. And listen, I know some of you are going through really difficult times right now. Maybe you lost someone important. Maybe you moved to a new city and don't know anyone. Maybe all your supposed friends abandoned you. Those moments are brutal. I'm not going to minimize them, but I want you to understand something fundamental. You're in the perfect moment to become unstoppable, not despite your solitude, but precisely because of it. This is your opportunity to build without interference, to grow without anyone telling you who you should be, to become your own masterpiece. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Controversial, I know, but there's a deeper truth there. What he was really saying is that genuine respect comes from strength, not from pleasing others, and genuine strength is forged in solitude. You can't build real character in the comfort of constant approval. You build it in the fire of facing yourself with no escape routes. Another tactical aspect, solitude gives you perspective. When you're in the middle of social chaos, everything seems urgent, everything seems important. But when you step away and observe from the distance of solitude, suddenly you see what truly matters and what's just noise. You see which people add value to your life and who only drain energy. You see which projects deserve your time and which are distractions. That clarity is invaluable and only comes with distance. I've noticed that the most successful people I know in any field have something in common. They protect their time alone like it's gold, because it is. They know that's when they do their best work, when they have their best ideas, when they recalibrate and make sure they're on the right path. It's not selfishness, it's smart strategy. You can't give your best to the world if you don't spend time with yourself first. Solitude is also where you process pain and come out stronger. Most people avoid processing their pain. They bury it under work, parties, new relationships, anything that distracts them. But unprocessed pain is like poison that accumulates. Eventually, it makes you sick. Solitude forces you to face it, to feel it completely. And only then can you transform it. You can convert that pain into wisdom, into empathy, into determination. But only if you stay there long enough. I want you to understand something else. When you master your solitude, you automatically become less manipulable. Because most psychological manipulation works by playing with your social insecurities, your fear of rejection, your need to belong. But if you're already complete in your solitude, if you already know you'll be fine alone, those tactics don't work. You can see manipulation clearly because you don't have the desperation that makes it effective. You become someone they can't control. Finally, and this is the most important thing, solitude is where you build your relationship with yourself, and that's the only relationship that's going to accompany you from your first breath to your last. All other people will eventually leave, one way or another, but you're stuck with yourself forever. So doesn't it make sense to invest in that relationship? Doesn't it make sense to get to know yourself, to respect yourself, to genuinely like yourself? People who truly love themselves, not in a narcissistic way, but in a genuine way, almost always spent significant time in solitude reaching that conclusion. Solitude isn't punishment. It's not evidence that something's wrong with you. It's not something you need to cure by running toward the first person who pays attention to you. Solitude is your personal power laboratory. It's where you shed everything false and build something real. It's where magic happens away from prying eyes. And when you finally return to the world, and you will, you'll return transformed. You'll return stronger, clearer, more focused, more yourself than ever before. Machiavelli didn't write his masterpieces in the midst of applause and power. He wrote them in exile, alone, forgotten by many. But those words, written in solitude, have influenced leaders, strategists, and thinkers for 500 years. That's the power of solitude properly used. It's not what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you build when nobody's watching, that everyone will eventually see. So the next time you feel alone, remember this: you're not alone. You're training. You're not isolated. You're focused. You're not lost. You're finding yourself. And in a world full of constant noise, your voluntary silence is your greatest strategic advantage. Use your solitude as the secret weapon it is, because in the end, the person who's most dangerous in any game is the one who doesn't need to play, but chooses to do so from a position of absolute internal strength. Now it's your turn to decide. Are you going to keep running from solitude like everyone else? Or are you going to embrace it, master it, and use it to build the unstoppable version of yourself you always knew you could be? The choice was always yours. It will always be yours. And that, brother, is the greatest power that exists.